Thank you very much. The nice thing about being last person to speak is I agree with everything that's been said so far. And the reason why I agree with everything that's been said so far, everyone on this panel has a role to play in my organization, starting with Zambia, who chairs the Conference of the Parties of our member states. France has been supporting us. The African Union will part of the AU Summit, AU African Union. Germany has been supporting us, and a new partner we have to our right. So you can imagine how excited I am to be here, to see our partners doing the talking on our behalf, as opposed to me saying how great we are. I have to admit, I was just about to leave town without hearing the big numbers. So to hear $1 billion on the table as a commitment, that's exactly the news I want to hear before I leave Sharm el-Sheikh. And may I ask you just to give a big round of applause to the EU for the support. Just think for a second, if you can get that kind of commitment from different partners, we'll go a long way in addressing loss and damage. And let's hope by the time the COP is over, the numbers will go to 6 billion, 10 billions, will reach the 100 billions we've been talking about. So to me, the first message to say, that commitment fits with the overall framework, an ambition and doing something about loss and damage, and that's something to be saluted as far as the EU is concerned. Let me make 3 quick points. Number 1, the point I'm about to make is on behalf of Africa, and talk about the problem as we see it in Africa. Talk about where we see the demand in intervention, now that we got the money. And then third, what would it take to be successful as far as Africa is concerned? As far as the problem is concerned, disaster risk management in Africa, it has a face. It has a human face. And that is to say, what is it? Drought, tropical cyclone, and flood. It affects the livelihood of many Africans across the continent. So therefore, for us, it's not just a talk. It's about survival. It's about protecting life and livelihood, because many Africans are affected by drought, affected by food insecurity. So therefore, what we're doing here at COP27 will have an impact a long way in addressing the needs of Africans who are affected by disaster. It's important to have that in the back of our mind to understand what I call the human face of climate change. But for us to be successful, there are a couple of things that need to happen. First, leadership. And that is why I'm delighted to have the African Union here, because the African Union is leading the way in making sure other partners will join the African Union to see African solution to African problems and strategic partnership with other players to make sure we can be part of the solution. And then second, to have also what I call a strategic alignment with what the African Union wants to do. And that's the reason why my organization, everything that we do, fits within the overall disaster management, climate change strategy of the African Union, so that we don't get actually sidetracked and be focused on what the African Union wants to do. And that's why alignment is extremely important. Now, if I look at the demand, what do we have needs as far as Africa is concerned, based on our experience? Twofold. Number 1, we're talking about understanding the needs in a way that we can actually profile the risk and the exposure of Africa to disasters. And here, the number 1 need is, how do we profile the risk? How do we have access to data? How do we understand to modeling what is that we're dealing with? And that is why the early warning system for Africa is extremely critical, because that's how we can build the capacity of African countries to understand the magnitude of the problem before we even talk about solutions. So therefore, when it comes to early warning systems, when it comes to contingency planning, capacity building, what the Africans are saying, let's make sure the early warning system, technology, and data and modeling are accessible to Africans so we can actually understand the problem before we talk about the solutions. Second, In Africa, it is also important to my organization. We support the African to transfer the risk to the insurance market so we can mobilize additional resources to make sure that the first response of African governments come from the insurance market so we can save life and livelihood. And here, our biggest challenge is the affordability and the accessibility and the availability of premium finance. And that is why we commend the Global Shield as an initiative whereby access to premium financing will be made available. So African government who want to transfer the risk to the insurance market have access to additional resources to be able to actually have the resources required and the subsidies required to transfer the risk to the insurance market. So hopefully the Global Shield will be accessible enough combined with the initiative of the European Union so we can support the African governments. So finally, what does it take for this to be successful? A couple of things. Number one, we don't have to reinvent the wheels. There are existing African institutions, including mine, that need to be leveraged and empowered so we can fast-track implementation. And that's why the support that the European Union has provided to my organization just last week, 9 million euro, will go a long way in supporting our capacity building, our modeling of risk, our research and development so we can actually help African government to transfer the risk. So the first thing that we need to be doing is supporting the existing initiatives. Second, we have to approach it from a holistic way. It's not just about risk transfer. It's also building capacities. I'm hoping in our intervention, we look at this from a very holistic approach as opposed to looking at piecemeal intervention. And last but not least, equally important, and that is gender. You look at across Africa, the most vulnerable people happen to be women. So whatever we do, if we don't put gender into the picture, we are missing the most important part of vulnerable communities. So mainstream gender and gender disaster management is absolutely important if you want to be successful. So my organization is committed to putting our work on the table, our experience, our track record, and make sure the 1 billion is put to use so we can be successful in Africa. So thank you.